want to talk, I think, a bit of context at the beginning about the crisis of media models. Historically, there have been 3. I'm going to say there are now 2. That's a big problem for people that believe in democracy, a better kind of society. How do we respond to that? Specifically, how do we respond to that through BBC reform? And then I want to lay out some specific reforms, 4 reforms. I think 2 around the BBC and 2 are more general ones. Firstly, what has the BBC got wrong in recent years? Okay, Scotland in 2014, 2015 general election, Corbyn winning, Brexit, Corbyn winning again. That's remarkable in 2 years. Basically, every big call politically they've got wrong. And I don't think that run is going to end anytime soon. It's a fundamental point of rupture, I think, actually, with what Britain is thinking and feeling. That's to do with its institutional makeup, and that's also to do with its class makeup. They really have no idea about what's going on outside of White City or bits of Salford or SW1 in Westminster. They really have no idea. But anyway, crisis media model. So historically, there have been 3 ways of producing media, getting to a mass audience. 1, you be really rich, you can be an oligarch or a philanthropist. 2, you can be a state. 3, you can do it through a market mechanism whereby you produce and distribute content and then the consumers will pay for it. Okay? So before the arrival of digital, there are very high costs of entry to being able to do this, to have a TV station or a radio station or a newspaper. You needed lots of capital, high startup costs, right? Now, obviously with the arrival of digital, you've got a set of trends, and it's not just computational power, data, storage, bandwidth. The prices have collapsed, okay? Which has basically meant the price of informational goods have collapsed too. And that made impossible that market model. That disappeared overnight, or let's say metaphorically overnight, over 20 years. And it's now gone. So we're now left with 2 models of funding news content. Fundamental, okay? States and oligarchs. BBC, RIA Novosti, doesn't exist anymore, I think it's been changed now by Putin. RT, Al Jazeera by the Qatari royal family, or Jeff Bezos at the Washington Post, Yevgeny Lebedev at the Independent or the Evening Standard, or even when it's progressive, The Intercept. Glenn Greenwald's New Thing is funded by a guy called Pierre Omidyar, comes out of eBay, has big money. So fundamentally, we've lost that third thing, that market model. And that was really the ballast for bourgeois democracy for 200 years. It was the ballast for their conception of civil society, specifically, of course, around the newspaper. Great quote by Hegel, I'll misquote it. He said that for the bourgeois, that the ritual of reading the newspaper every morning replaces that of prayer, which is totally true. That's gone. That whole conception of civil society, of the public sphere, is gone. That's not to say that print has secular problems all over the place, because it doesn't. Okay, so I think book sales, offline book sales, went up last year for the first time in 4 years. E-book sales fell for the first time in 7 years. There are some very successful print publications out there. Die Zeit in Germany, its audience has actually gone up since 2007. Okay, despite what we were told was, just a collapse in print media. Monocle magazine, ridiculous magazine, has 70,000 copies, I think, every month sold. The LRB, it's not making money, but it's selling more copies than ever before. Likewise, The Spectator. But what is definitively finished is the print daily newspaper. Definitively. I was asked by an Observer journalist being interviewed ahead of the Momentum sort of fringe conference, the World Transformed, and she said, what do you think the Observer should do? What do you think the Guardian should do? And I think, well, you probably should get rid of the Guardian, make it the Guardian Weekend, make it a weekend paper, a premium product, go online. They didn't like that. Fine. But the daily newspaper is finished, okay? That doesn't mean print's finished, but the daily newspaper is finished. So in terms of people that want to appeal to mass audiences, persuade people, create a different kind of politics, that's a problem. And a problem in so much that has to be overcome, okay? It's not a problem that we can't overcome. And I think the way we do that, for me anyway, is through BBC reform, which, by the way, it just has unbelievable market share in Britain. Has 70% of the TV news market, has something like 75% of the radio news market. I mean, it's totally ridiculous, actually. If, the Monopolies Commission should be getting involved. That, 70% of online news market. Okay? The point is, it's crap. So there's a real opportunity there to change fundamentally the public conversations around a range of issues because it has such an amazing market share. Right, so one other thing as well before I get into these proposals. Cam, you were saying about Murdoch. This is also an interesting point. The enemy is not big business, I think. because the news and current affairs game is no longer good business, no longer makes you money. First quarter of 2016, 85% of online advertising, where did it go? Facebook and Google. If you're advertising a product, you're not going to use Vice, you're not going to use BuzzFeed, right? Because the most specific, tailored advertising infrastructure in the world is on Facebook, it's on Google. Facebook over 1.3 billion daily users, and you can target them in such an incredibly microscopic way, simply impossible through any other medium. So people that think, oh, well, the Guardian's gone, the Times is going, whatever, but we've got BuzzFeed, we've got Vice, sure, their margins are lower, but those are the new kids on the block. Sorry, they're not going to last 5-10 years. There is no revenue model now for news and current affairs unless you're Facebook and Google. Really remarkable, which makes the idea of a levy very, very clever, I think. I think a 1% levy is a very, very clever idea. So when we talk about the enemies, I think more about oligarchs necessarily, people that are trying to accumulate immense amounts of personal power rather than big business, because it's not good business being in this game anymore. So the proposals, first one, this is specifically around the BBC, in the white paper that's been introduced, was this year, wasn't it? Tom is such a specialist on the BBC, I don't get anything wrong, he just knows everything so forensically. One of the things that was introduced was contestable funding. It's a contestable public service content fund, it's contestable, it's like £60 million a year. It's not much, it's pathetic really. And it's actually insulated from news and current affairs. So people, it's a contestable pot of money people can apply for to make programming. And I actually think the BBC makes outstanding drama and documentaries. I loved War and Peace. I thought it was fabulous. Complete counterpoint to Nick Robinson or Laura Koonsberg. Really world class actually, right? The thing, like I say, and I think this is an ideological point, is that what was insulated was news and current affairs. I would actually have contestable funding for news and current affairs before anything else. Right now, news and current affairs annual budget of about £360 million. About 5,000 people work there. So let's say we make 1/3 of that funding, £120 million a year. Make it contestable, okay? Allow non-commercial, verified non-commercial organisations to apply for the money. Make it like Arts Council funding. The people that oversee that funding process, make them elected, just as we should make much of the governance of the BBC, the Director General elected. Of course they should be elected. That would be my first proposal. In addition to that, with the white paper, we've seen a kind of precaritization of BBC workers. The in-house guarantees now gone, so you'll see a lot more for-profit, out-of-house producers of content. So if we're going to introduce contestable funding, expand it for organisations like Real Media or Open Democracy or Novara Media, dare I say it, we should also guarantee the rights and the working conditions of workers currently there, right? Clearly you can't do one without the other if you're a progressive. So yeah, and why would you do that? Why are you expanding that contestable funding? Because I think in the 21st century, if we're talking about the fourth estate, if we're talking about civil society, it's not state, it's non-market, it's something in between, okay? And it's about providing an ecology, set of funding institutions which can allow that to scale up, because people are trying their best, but really, when you've got the resources we have, it's very, very difficult to reach a mass market audience. And this is where I think public funding comes in. Number two, I haven't thought about this at all, but I don't think anybody who's not paying UK tax should be allowed to own 1 penny of equity in a UK media company. They shouldn't be able to have 1 share, Now, how would we do this? I'm not a wonk, I've not been working on this stuff for a long time, so I don't know. Maybe Tom knows people. When we've got a Labour government, they can go and they can march into Whitehall, they can work all this out, But I think that's really fundamental. We can't have, look, the 2 biggest papers in this country by market share, the Daily Mail and the Sun, over 50% of the print daily news market share are owned by tax avoiders. I mean, it's just ridiculous. The idea that you're going to get progressive change under those conditions is clearly it's impossible. It's not going to happen. So that has to change. Number 3, press support. We need to subsidise local media. We need to reinvigorate local media. Not easy. They do something quite cool in Norway. Every city's 2nd largest newspaper gets a pretty large subsidy. And I think we could do something similar here. And that funding would allow them to operate, but also to upgrade, okay? To rebrand, to move into new spaces, through podcasts, through video content, to move more into social media, go to younger audiences, go and cover stuff, patient journalism, investigative journalism, stuff that's currently not being done. So that'd be a great way of invigorating local media. And then finally, I don't know if you're familiar with a proposal called the McChesney proposal. It's in a book called Digital Disconnect. He talks about a Citizens Universal News Voucher, a public subsidy for verified, non-commercial, independent media, a bit of a mouthful. Basically, each person, 65 million Brits, some of them, obviously can't speak yet, so, they would have difficulty deciding who they give their money to. But let's say, we're looking at 55 million people, a really large number of people given £10 each to be able to give to the media source of their choosing. Now, what would that do? It would create both a push and a pull effect. People would want to push the money to the organisations they want to give it to. But it would also mean organisations, maybe like The Guardian, they're controlled by trust, would they be permitted to be part of that? Probably, I think they probably would be. The Guardian, or the people that are going for the contestable BBC funding, again, open democracy, the Bristol Cable, the Manchester Mule, would be going for that money, right? They'd be trying to push what they have to offer, their project, to the general public, because there's a hell of a lot of money there, right? You're looking at maybe 550 million, 600 million. So between those proposals about reinvigorating local media, contestable funding in the BBC, by the way, that first one isn't any new money involved, okay? We're just reallocating money as it currently exists. And the McChesney proposal, you're looking at like £1 billion. And in terms of expanding our democracy in a meaningful sense, in terms of saving an industry, which really is on the brink of collapse, and like I say, specifically in the context of Facebook and Google, getting so much now of advertising market share, there is actually a problem that needs to be resolved in terms of an industry which creates thousands of jobs. I think that's not a big price to pay. So a few conclusions. Firstly, a new deal on media isn't just good for our politics, it's also good in winning these people over. What I cannot begin to comprehend is why so many journalists are so complicit with the status quo when they are being absolutely decimated as an industry. I find it completely ridiculous. Take The Guardian. You've got some of the biggest ideologues for moderate politics. They are seeing their living standards slide. I find it completely absurd. And I think by giving that new deal on media, you can bring a large swathe, actually, of them over to a left project. Secondly, and this is really, again, I have to say, everything's remarkable. I think it is remarkable. If you look at the Tories' economic record since 2010, I did a video on this recently. GDP per capita per person, okay, has gone up 1% since 2007. 1% per capita. It's basically flatlined. 9 years. It's like Japan, lost decade, right? Productivity has gone down slightly. Wages. What's happened to them? They've gone down 10.4% since 2007. 10.4%. Now, not only will you not hear this anywhere, right? This is the worst performing economy. Looking at a macro scale, the pound is now sliding. It's going to go below, it should go below $1. There's no country in the developed world that's performing like that, bar Greece. Really? Look at the data. Okay, the US is doing great. German wages have gone up 13% over the same period. US wages 6%. French wages 10%. Okay? For every hour of work you do here, workers get the same output in 40 minutes in Holland or in Belgium or France. Those are big differences. We really are going to be found out in the next couple of years. The point is, that performance is terrible. And if you had a Labour government presiding over that kind of data, specifically around wages since 2010, they'd be polling 15%. People would be attacking them in the street. The point that they're not is because the Tories play by a different set of rules with the media. Theresa May gives an audacious speech, I think, as Prime Minister. First speech as Tory Prime Minister at party conference. Audacious. And she's lauded as a centrist. And maybe she's a centrist if you're, a white footsie sort of, CEO. Even then, some of your your friends and colleagues are going to be really pissed off. So it's really, really remarkable that, this is seen as a moderate or a centrist project. It's not. It's really not. So yes, in short, if we're going to create a different politics, we need a different media. And I think if we're pragmatic about things, yes, we need what you might call a Gramscian strategy. We need new institutions. We need outrider institutions. But we also need a Fabian one. We need to work within existing organisations and change them, given its market share and given its proclaimed values of public service. I think the BBC is a great place to start.